thing to note is I do not like monologues. Okay? So if you have a question, ask it. If you disagree with me on something, let me know. I love to enter into a little bit of debate about stuff, so let's just keep the conversation going. So how many of you have employees? Here, or is it just you? You got two. All right. Do you trust your employees? Some. Maybe. Okay. And the question that I would ask them is, how do they know that? What evidence would they give if I went up to them and said, your boss, Whitney, sorry, red eyes, Whitney, your boss, Whitney, tells me that she trusts you. How would I know that? Might be interesting to see what some of your employees would say about what evidence they would see. Because I think generally, all of us would love to believe that we trust others and that others trust us. I cannot begin to tell you the number of courses I've taught, starting off asking that question, and everybody's like, oh, we trust. What does your dress code policy look like? Right? Because we want to write in all of the rules for people. So, just something to think about. So let's start off by defining trust. What is trust? The choice. Can you see? The choice to place confidence in someone or something when the outcome is not certain. If we know, if it's a given, then we don't really have to trust. It's a fact, right? It involves a level of risk and vulnerability. I know there have been times I have chosen to place trust in somebody and it makes me scared to death. Are they going to do the right thing? Some risks have higher probabilities of success or failure, so you have to be smart about when you place trust. I don't want to say that trust is always the right thing to do here. So, why do we care about trust at all? Have any of you ever worked in a low-trust environment? All right. What did that look like for you? Yeah. Micromanaging. Anything else? Were you performing at your best when somebody didn't trust you? No, because you're scared, right? You don't want to make a mistake because you know you're going to get slapped upside the head. So, with trust, you end up with better relationships. We perform better when we know we are trusted. Well, we're going to take risks, and we'll see how this can actually transform into dollars if you allow people to take some risks. Without trust, micromanaging, there's an economic cost. Every control you put on something can cost you money, right? I know some of you would argue, yeah, but if you don't have any controls, that can cost you money too, and absolutely it can. I'm not telling you to be blind about trust. But know that when you put those controls in place and you are micromanaged or micromanaging, there's only one person thinking. You're not getting the benefit of everybody thinking, right? So, what percent of employees do you think don't trust their boss? Anybody got a guess?
70%.
Okay? Then I said 70%. Anybody else?
85%.
Huh?
85%.
85%. Okay, you got skeptical group. But I get it. More than 50% of employees say that they don't trust their boss. And it's interesting because the next row down, they say that being trusted is critical for them doing their job right and feeling like they're doing a valuable job. Employees, especially millennials coming into, well, millennials are in the workplace for a while now, but they really want transparency. They really want to, you can't just say because I said so. They want to know the whys behind. They want to know what decisions you're making and how did you get to that decision. And by the way, if it's going to impact me, let me help you with that decision. So different generations handle some of this stuff differently. This generation coming up is asking a lot more questions and they want to be a lot more involved. So, I said earlier that it does actually translate into dollars, and it does. What you find, this was a study done by Interaction Associates Building Workplace Trust, and if a company was high trust, they were 2.5 times more likely to be revenue leaders. Why is that?
Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing and what the outcomes are supposed to be.
And they're willing, right, and they're willing to take some risks, right? Because if you're not taking any risks, you're not actually growing. So they're better fostering innovation in new projects. They build customer loyalty. How many of you have had, I'm sure I'm not the only one, had this customer service experience? You're describing something, and you can tell the poor person on the other side of the phone is doing nothing but reading a script. Yeah, no, but wait, and then go back to reading the script. Okay, come on, talk to me, get off the script. They are working in a low trust environment, right? Somebody does not trust them to handle your complaint. And what's going to happen to me as a customer? I'm walking.
Yes.
So these are, pardon? So these are the little things that, and when people set these scripts out, they didn't think of it as I don't trust people. They may have even thought of it as here's a way I'm going to help them out, right? But it then becomes a non-trust environment, especially the way things get implemented. When I went to work for Big Brothers Big Sisters here in town for a while, I started there and they go back to the dress code thing. They started off with a fairly lengthy dress code and kept wanting to add to it. And I finally looked at them and I said, why don't we just tell people to dress professionally? And if we don't think they are, let's have a conversation with them. Because I cannot write a dress code long enough to take care of every exception that somebody is going to think about. Right? And nor do I want to work in the kind of place that's going to tell me, here's every exception and why you can't do it. I don't want to work there. So, oftentimes we don't start off introducing a new policy or the way that we choose to manage things thinking that it's a lack of trust. But I would encourage you to take a step back and just take a look at the kind of culture you've developed and you've created, and is it one based on trust or is it one that may not be? So, this is where Scott and I really hit it off. Anybody read The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey? Okay, no Scott. Okay, they're wonders. Okay, so this is a great book. If you get a chance to read it, I would encourage you to do so. What Covey is talking about here is he's saying there's basically four cores of credibility. The top two are character-based, and the bottom two are competency-based. So let's kind of spend a little bit of time on this slide. With integrity, it's about making and keeping your commitments, standing for something. A lot of people don't think that leadership is, to me, one of the biggest characteristics of a good leader is having the courage to stand up for what you believe in when times are tough. And that gets incredibly hard. One of my, I worked at BP for many years, and right after the Amoco and BP merger happened, I was Amoco Heritage, this friend of mine was Amoco Heritage. Everybody who was Amoco Heritage was a nervous wreck, because somebody else had come in and bought us, right? So we're all sitting going, okay, we don't know what these new guys think of us, we don't have a track record with them, Lord, we're nervous. Well, her boss was new to being a business unit leader. and she was the sales and marketing manager. He called her into his office one day and said, I want you to fire the head of sales. Why? He's got a southern drawl. Do you think anybody thinks that guy is smart? Just go fire him. And Catherine said, well, he's hitting his numbers, his customers like him, his employees like him. No. You want him fired, you fire him. This is at a time when she was afraid for her own job. And she stood up to her boss and said, that's not the right thing to do. Now that story gets out, right? How do you think her team, what happened to her level of trust with her team? Went through the roof. They were all like, okay, I can trust her to stand up and do what's right. It takes a lot of courage to be a good leader. Examples like that get out all over the place. And then another counterbalancing example at BP, they were struggling to get the cultures to come together, and so they put out this thing called the Green Book, where they laid out, here's the way we all want to behave, right? Sounded great. Sounded like the kind of place that wanted to keep working. Great things. Then they came around and auditors did a little audit of some of the most senior leaders. And they said, we want you to make sure that your senior leaders are following these guidelines in the Green Book. And there were a few people in this one department who said, we think our guy is a little kind of on edge here. We don't think he's really exemplifying what you're talking about. Okay, we'll go look into it. Well, the audit department went back to these leaders and said, we agree, this guy's probably not doing what we think he should be, but if we do anything about him, we also have to do something about a large number of our senior executives, so we're not willing to do that at this point. Take that Green Book and throw it away, right? We didn't trust anything then. So those kinds of stories get out, and those are what makes part of your culture. That's part of what creates a culture of trust or not. Intent, that's really important, because what is your motive? What's the reason that you are having a conversation with an employee? What's your agenda? Is your agenda to put somebody else down, or is it to help build them up? One of the things that one story that I love to hear, love to tell is one that I heard about a man who went in, he made a $10 million mistake at a company. And the CEO of the company called him in. He was not a direct report of the CEO, kind of mid-level, early-level manager. CEO calls him in. This guy's shaking in his boots because what's about to happen? You're going to be fired, right? That's what's going through his head. So the CEO calls him in, the guy walks in, he goes, the CEO says, do you know why you're here? Well, yeah, I guess I'm about to get fired. The CEO said, no, not at all. He goes, I just invested $10 million in your learning. Tell me what you learned. How did that guy feel walking out of there?
Like he got it money.
Oh, yeah. And he went on to become a very senior leader at this particular company. And so it is little stories like that. And it was great that the CEO started the conversation with, here's the intent. Because if he would have waited until later on to do that, that poor guy would have been shaking in his boots the entire time and would not have heard any part of that conversation. So at the very beginning, the intent was made clear. The intent was, no, you're not going to get fired. I just want to know what it is you learned. Now those are pretty powerful stories and pretty powerful examples, but we all do that every day. The number of times that I've called employees in, and said, I want to have a conversation with you, and I haven't always started off with, I want you to succeed at this. My goal here is to declare your intent. That really helps to build trust. Because without declaring your intent, people don't know. And so what they're sitting there trying to gauge is, does this person mean well for me? Or is this person trying to put me down? Right? The bottom part is around capabilities, competency. So are you keeping your skills up to date? Are you learning new things? Are you continuing to learn? And then, do you deliver the results that you need to deliver? So if you work for somebody and you work really hard but you never feel like you're getting anywhere, how many of us have been on the hamster wheel? You work, and you kind of look up and you go, I'm in the same spot I was 2 weeks ago. I can't seem to get off, right? So this is about making sure that you are yourself and working with your teams to help them see progress, help them deliver results. I had a team one time who, they said, we feel like we work as hard for you as we did our previous boss, but at least when we look up and look back, we go, wow, we've come somewhere. You know, before it just felt like we were working really hard. So people will trust you more if you are able to deliver your results. So are you walking the talk? Do you have good intent? And then how are you at delivering? Are you keeping your skills strong? Do you deliver what you say you're going to deliver? Any questions? You're going to see this one come back up later. So, is there a time when we should not trust somebody?
Well, when you know they're lying.
Pardon?
When you know they're lying.
When you know they're lying, okay. How would you know that?
Sometimes you just, they say something and you know it's not true. Right?
Okay. Another time when you don't necessarily need to trust somebody.
They're not competent.
Right? Absolutely. So, there's a couple of times, right? One is when relationships matter less than the outcome. So, you'll see that happen a lot in a crisis situation. I'm not going to take a chance on trusting somebody when I've got to get everybody out in the building now and I know I can get it done. Right? That's not the time to trust. Another one is confidence level. So this comes from Ken Blanchard's situational leadership. And part of what it talks about is, when somebody is starting off, okay, first of all, how many of us have a go-to person? Somebody we always go to get stuff done? Nobody. Okay. That's kind of one person that you kind of always go to. Got something done? Need to get something done? You're that one person. That's great, but the thing you've got to remember is your go-to person may not always be able to deliver on everything that you think that they can. You've just gotten so used to going to that person, and they've been good, but sometimes we set them up to fail, and then who do we get mad at? We get mad at them because they didn't deliver when we needed them to deliver. What this is asking us to think about is not the whole person, but how is this person on this particular task? How good are they at doing this, right? So what it says is, if they are very inexperienced at a task, they're going to be high directive, but they're going to be low supportive. Why would they be low supportive? When somebody says, have you ever done da-da-da-da, and you go, no, most of us are overconfident in our ability to deliver. Right? It looks easy enough. Should be able to do that. Then we actually start doing it. So we're still high directed, but now we need more support. Because you know that marathon I said that looked kind of easy to run? I'm starting to figure out that running on the block is harder than I thought it was. So this is where you get more supported and you continue to get direction. Over here, they're becoming confident. They can now run 20 miles. But they still have that hang up about, I'm not sure I can do it. But they understand now how to run. And then down here, they get to become expert. They've already achieved it. You don't have to spend a lot of time directing, and you don't have to spend a lot of time supporting. You still have to support some, but it's not nearly the amount of support that you need up here. So it isn't that you don't trust the person, it's that you don't trust the person for this particular activity because their competence isn't where it needs to be. So what do you see here? A rabbit or a bird? Yeah, you see both. And that's kind of the point, right? So, I don't know how to break this to you. It doesn't matter whether or not you believe you are trustworthy. What matters is whether those around you believe that you are trustworthy. When things go wrong, have you ever said, yep, I own it. I moved it. Boy, that helps with your trustworthiness. Ever been around somebody who, when things go wrong, they're like, I don't know what happened, couldn't be me, right? So, I would ask you to just step back and think about, it doesn't matter really whether you think you're trustworthy, what do the people around you believe? Do they believe you're trustworthy? So, at this point, most people are sitting there going, got a trustworthy organization. Are your employees engaged? Are they innovative? Or are they hitting the time clock, checking in and checking out? Is information power in your organization? Or do we just share it because we know that everybody will do better with it if they get the information? When things go wrong, do we own it or do we finger point? I am amazed at the number of companies I've worked with who talk about the blame game. And then they also talk about the meeting after the meeting because they don't have enough trust in their culture to have the difficult conversation sitting in the meeting. Right? So we're going to then, as soon as everybody breaks up, well, do you believe what so-and-so says? I can't, nope, okay, can't do that, can't do that. And we have all of these little meetings after the meetings. Have the meeting. Have the honest conversation. If we were to look at your employee handbook, do your policies and procedures suggest that you trust employees? One time I was on a project, we were redoing a lot of our systems, and there was a man who was in charge of the payroll system, and this included manufacturing all the way up to senior level executives. And at the steering committee, he started off with a comment, I'm going to assume when I'm designing this that we trust our employees. Oh, yes, absolutely. So he went through and designed the process. At no point was there a place where their timesheet had to be approved prior to pay being submitted. We trust our employees. There would be exception reports kicked out the back. Do you know what happened in that next steering committee meeting? You what? No, you said we trust our employees. We'll get exception reports. You know, if somebody does a typo or if somebody is trying to cheat us, we will know it. But if we trust our employees, why do we have to sign off on all of their time cards before we issue paychecks? Just a little something to think about. This one is coming to a lot in manufacturing. We're seeing this a lot in manufacturing organizations. If I teach somebody how to do my job, they won't need me anymore, and I don't want to retire for another 5 years. So I'm not going to teach anybody for a while. Right? That would be another sign of a low trust culture. They don't trust that you're actually going to keep them there long enough for as long as they need to want to be there. So, how can leaders build trust with their teams? Transparency is great. Let people know what they're thinking. One of my favorite YouTube videos is about a 20-minute TED Talk that Brene Brown did called The Power of Vulnerability. If you haven't seen it, it's 20 minutes. Brene, B-R-E-N-E, Brown, The Power of Vulnerability. She's great, and she's funny, so it's not a dry conversation. The more human you come across, the more it allows everybody else to be human and to be authentic. Are you willing to have the tough conversations? So at one of these companies where we have the trust conversation, one of the exercises I have people do is we'll look at the culture they're trying to create, and then I say, all right, so here's the next exercise we're going to do. You sit around with a team of people that you work with, and I want you to go around the table, and everybody, we'll start with me, everybody has to tell me the one thing that I do really well to help build this culture. Everybody's okay with that? Then we move on to, okay, now what is the one thing I have to change or eliminate for the good of the team? You want to talk about people getting nervous. You want me to what? No, really. What's the one thing I need to change or eliminate for the good of the team? And it always ends up being a really great exercise at the end that people are incredibly nervous to do this little exercise because they don't want to have to say something that might hurt somebody else's feelings. And at the end of the day, feedback, and for me, I don't know about you guys, getting feedback is huge. And again, millennials coming in, they're expecting feedback constantly. Annual performance reviews, if you guys don't go out the window, it's going to go to just a continuous feedback kind of a thing, right? And it's got to be done in a very supportive way. So what we find most of the time is people are bugging at the end of these things. How did you know I was doing that and it bothered you? That's easy to change, okay? Creating the space and being supportive. Crisis situations. Anybody ever been through a crisis? Family crisis, business crisis, any of them? You end up, right? So you either get so much closer or so much further away, depending on how that thing works, with the people that you are in that crisis with. Right? Because you either create a trusting environment and you figure out your way through it, or trust falls apart and you know you then end up, you can't trust those people. So there are people who even interview this way. They will get a group of candidates in a room and say, okay, there's 15 of you here, 3 of you will end up working for us. Here's your project, go do it. You see real quick who's in it for them and who's in it to really try to build trust and make the whole team work, right? So, I've taken more than my time. At the end of the day, the one thing that we know to be true is that people don't tend to leave companies. People tend to leave people. And so, as business owners, as managers, as people who are going to be managers one of these days, I would challenge you to ask yourself, are you somebody that people are going to want to follow? And if your employees had the right to fire you, would you change the way you behave? Because that's what really generates a lot of trust.